So about the classification of the living organisms into different kingdoms as per the Whitaker's classification. So today we'll see in detail about the plant kingdom. So why plants are classified into a separate chapter? That is, we are studying other kingdoms, that is Monera, Protista, and then fungi. We all studied under the biological classification, but the plant kingdom, we are studying it as a separate chapter. So why is that? Because there are so many varieties of plants. So when you see around, we can see so many varieties, aquatic plants, terrestrial plants, and also herbs, shrubs, and so many varieties of that. So we are studying it as a separate chapter, both plants as well as the animals. So before going into detail, actually we'll see a little bit about the classification, about the type of classification. So before entering into the plant kingdom, there are several systems of biological classification. So already we saw the outline of what is an artificial system and what is a natural system and what is a phylogenetic system of classification. So what do you mean by all these systems of biological classification? We saw under the biological classification mainly as per the Whitaker's classification. So what do you mean by this artificial system of classification? That is, as per the artificial system, we saw that only few characters will be taken into account. But in the case of natural system of classification, many factors were taken into account. So we'll see a bit in detail about the system of classification, and then we'll see about the plant kingdom. So first is the artificial classification system. So what do you mean by the artificial classification system? So it is one of the earliest system of classification. So before that, there was only a vague thing as plants and animals. So earliest system of classification took into account only a few characteristics. It didn't take into account all the characteristics. For example, they were based on the vegetative characters or the, what do you mean by the vegetative characters? Or the superficial morphological characters, such as habit, color, number, and shape of the leaves. So if you classify as per this characters, for example, shape of the leaf or the number of leaves, it will differ from plant to plant, and also it will vary according to the environmental condition. Sometimes if the soil contains more nutrient, there will be rapid growth of the plant. And also the number of leaves as per the season may change. There will be a leaf fall. So it may change as per the environmental conditions. So earlier they took into account the vegetative characters or the superficial morphological characters. That is only the externally seeing the as per the external appearance. And Linnaeus artificial system of classification was based on the anthrasium structure. So what do you mean by this anthrasium structure? That is, he classified it on the basis of stamens. So how the stamens are present, whether it is monodelphous. So you'll see in detail about all this condition when you see the morphological, that is about the plants, about the morphological appearance, root, leaf, and in those things we'll see in detail about this. So the Linnaeus artificial system of classification was based on the anthrasium structure. Only that particular stamen structure he took into account for classification. But in all the other ways, the plant may be different. So only one factor was taken into consideration in the case of artificial classification system. But before that, there was not a proper classification system. So it was something, some character was taken into account for classifying. So what are the drawbacks of it? They separated the closely related species. So some species which may be very closely related, they are classified as a different category. Actually, the other characters are all similar to it and they are so closely related. But when you see the stamens alone, they may be different. So they are placed in a different category since they were based on a few characteristics. So we cannot say that as per the artificial system of classification, we cannot say that a particular species belong to this particular category. They may show a closely related, but they'll be putting in a different category. And wide difference will be there, but in the case of stamens, they may be linked together. So they are put under the same category. So they separated the closely related species since they were based on a few characteristics. Only a few characteristics were taken into account. And also another main drawback is equal weightage was given to vegetative and sexual characteristics. So what do you mean by this? The vegetative characters are the characters that will change as per the environmental conditions. So, but equal weightage was given. So that was not a fair classification. So this is not acceptable since the vegetative characters are more easily affected by environment. So there were so many drawbacks in the case of artificial classification system. So then there comes the natural classification system. So what about the natural classification system? Here they are based on natural affinities among the organisms. So natural interaction among the organisms, and it took into account both external features as well as the internal features. So ultrastructure, anatomy, embryology, phytochemistry, all the factors were taken into account. So ultrastructure. The example for the natural system of classification is the classification of the flowering plants, angiosperms, by George Bentham and Joseph Dalton Hooker. So his way of classification is the example for the natural system of classification. So here when you see the species that comes under the one category are closely related since they took into account many factors, both external as well as the internal features. So the closely related species are placed in the same category. So this is the best classification system when compared to that of the artificial system of classification. But here also there are some drawbacks that this natural system of classification did not take into account the evolutionary factors. The evolutionary factors were not taken into consideration. Were not taken into consideration in the case of natural classification system. So next comes the phylogenetic classification system. Here these are based on evolutionary relationship among the organisms. So this assumes that the organisms in the same taxa have a common ancestor. So based on that, now evolutionary relationship, we are classifying the organisms. So all the organisms with same taxa, in the sense the same rank, they are derived from a common ancestor. So from the common ancestor, they diverged. So based on that, they classified the organism that is called the phylogenetic. Genetic, is based on the genetical differences or the nucleic acid differences in the nucleic acid. So phylogenetic classification systems. Then next is the, so there are other sources to resolve the problems in classification. That is, apart from these evolutionary factors, nowadays so many other factors are taken into account for classification. For example, numerical taxonomy. So what is this numerical taxonomy? We saw that day itself what it is like. So it is based on the all observable characteristics, and it is carried out using computers. Number and codes are assigned to all the characters. For example, if you take the character like where it exists, that is habitat. If you take some hydra and same, so where it exists, whether it is in the water or land, and compare it with the human beings or the monkey, so terrestrial or aquatic. And then what about the mode of reproduction? whether it is sexual or asexual. And based on the so many characters they took into account, that is different number of characters were taken into account, and they gave the quotes, number and quotes were assigned for all the characters. So they are giving equal importance to all types of characters. So they'll take some 100 characters, and based on that, they see all the observable characteristics, and they are carried out using the computers. So if they are about 90 characters or similar to two organisms, then they are putting it they're the same category. So if the number of similarities are less, then in a different categories. So it is based on all the observable characteristics, and that is called the numerical, that is number of observable characteristics. That is called the numerical taxonomy. So it took into account all the characters like vegetative, sexual, and every character were taken into account. And then cytotaxonomy. So cytotaxonomy means it is based on the cytological information like chromosome number and the structure of chromosomes. Structure of chromosomes in the sense, you know that centromere. So depending upon the position of the centromere, and there are so many factors inside the cell were taken into account. So that is cytotaxonomy. And then chemotaxonomy uses the chemical constituents of the plants. Like some plants will produce the constituent like lignin, they may have flavonoids. So based on that also they categorized the plants. So these are the different systems of biological classification, that is the artificial system of classification, then natural system of classification, phylogenetic system of classification, and other than that, they also use the other sources like numerical taxonomy and then cytotaxonomy and chemotaxonomy for classifying the organisms. So these are the different systems of classification. So then we'll, before entering into the plant kingdom, so under plant kingdom, we'll study about the algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms, and angiosperms. But here also the classification of the different organisms differ as per the different scientists. For example, we saw that under two kingdom classification, all the plants, those plants means they contain the all cell wall, whatever the organisms that have the cell wall, they are classified under plants as per the two kingdom classification. Two kingdom classification. It included only plants and animals. So here the plants in the sense it included all the organisms with cell wall. So fungi and then bacteria, everything is included only under plants. So, but if you see the five kingdom classification, we saw as Monera, Protista, fungi, then Plantae, and Animalia. So here plants, it included all, even fungi, then bacteria, everything that comes under plants. But five kingdom classification, as per the five kingdom classification, the classification changes, that species, the variety of species that comes under the Plantae changes. And there are also actually different types of classification. One is called the three kingdom classification. So different scientists, they classified it in a different way. And this three kingdom classification, actually it was proposed by Ernst Haeckel. So what he did is, first in two kingdom only Plantae and Animalia. So here he classified it into Plantae, Animalia, and Protista. He classified a different category, that is all the unicellular eukaryotes, he put it under Protista. But in this case, the Protista includes all the archaebacteria, then fungi, all comes under the Protista. But that comes as another scientist, that is Copeland. He did the 4 kingdom classification. The 4 kingdom classification. So what he did, he divided this Protista into two, that is Monera and Protista. He classified it into a separate class, that is Monera, then which included all Orchibacteria and the Eubacteria, and then Protista, and he called it as Protoctista, which included all the unicellular eukaryotes, and also he placed algae also under Protoctista, and Plantae and Animalia. So actually different scientists, they classified it in different ways. So if you take Plantae, as per the 2 kingdom classification, the Plantae includes all the cell wall containing organisms. So if you take the 3 kingdom classification, here the Protista got separated. So the Plantae includes the other plants, but here the bacteria and then unicellular eukaryotes were placed under Protista. Then under 4 kingdom classification by Copeland, he again divided this Protista into Monera and Protoctista. Here the bacteria, Archaebacteria and Eubacteria. They were placed into a separate kingdom, and this included the other unicellular eukaryotes, and also he placed algae under Protoctista. And then, so now what we are following is the 5 kingdom classification by Whittaker, which put all the prokaryotes under Monera and the unicellular eukaryotes under Protista. Then all the multicellular forms are placed under fungi, Plantae and Animalia. So I hope it is clear. So even if you see the algae, the data itself saw that as per Whittaker, the algae comes under 3 kingdom, that is the blue-green algae or the cyanobacteria, which comes under Monera, and the golden algae and some other form of phytoplanktonic forms that comes under Protista, and here green algae, brown algae and red algae that comes under algae under the kingdom, that is Plantae. So if you take algae, it comes under 3 different kingdoms as per the Whittaker. So different scientists, they classified it in a different way. So if you take the blue-green algae, it comes under Monera because most of its properties are similar to that of bacteria. And this blue-green algae, actually, it is supposed to be the first oxygen-producing organism in the earth. So, and also it is involved in nitrogen fixation. For example, Anobina and some other organisms are involved in nitrogen fixation. So most of the properties of blue-green algae is similar to bacteria. So it is placed under the kingdom Monera. And also under the golden algae and some other phytoplanktonic forms that comes under Protista, that is we saw the dinoflagellates, everything. Diatoms that comes under the Protista. So this green algae, brown algae and red algae comes under Plantae. So now we'll see in detail about the classification of the Plantae. So how are we classifying? First, Plantae is classified into plant body, not differentiated. That is Thallophyta. And plant body differentiated. So this includes the Algae not differentiated in the sense it is not differentiated into root, stem or leaves. And plant body differentiated, again we can divide it into without vascular tissue. Without vascular tissue, that is bryophytes. Then with vascular tissue. And under with vascular tissue, we can classify it into seeds not produced. So this includes peridophytes. And here seeds produced. Or you can call it as phanerogams. Under this, we can again classify it into naked seeds. That is gymnosperms. Then into covered seeds. That is angiosperms. And again, depending upon the number of seeds, it is dicots and monocots. So these are the different types of plants that comes under the kingdom Plantae. So first Plantae is differentiated into plant body not differentiated, that is Stylophyta, then plant body differentiated into true stem, root and leaves. And under that, again, without vascular tissue, there is bryophytes, and with vascular tissue. And under with vascular tissue comes the seeds not produced. In case of peridophytes, they have vascular tissue, but they don't have produced seeds. And with the vascular tissue, and if they're able to produce seeds, that comes under the term that is phanerogams. It includes gymnosperms and angiosperms. And in the case of seeds, if the seeds are naked, then it is called that comes under the gymnosperms. And covered seeds, that is the seeds will be present inside the fruit, then they are angiosperms. That is also called the flowering plants. And gymnosperms are again classified into dicots and monocots. Okay, is it clear? So next we'll see in detail about the algae, which comes under the plant kingdom. So first, the algae are simple thalloid, that we know that body is not differentiated into root, stem and leaves. They are autotrophic. They are able to produce their own food, and chlorophyll bearing. So they have the chlorophyll so that they are able to photosynthesize, and they are aquatic, freshwater and also marine organisms. So under the plant category, this comes as the first, and it is a primitive. So the higher plants evolved from this algae. They also occur in moist stones, soils, and wood. So though they are aquatic, it doesn't need the complete presence of water. Even if it is a moist environment like moist soil or the moist stone, or even the wood with the little moisture content, they can survive. So they also occur in moist stone, soil, and wood. Some occur in association with fungi that we saw yesterday as lichen. So the main algae that is present in association with fungi is green algae and blue-green algae or cyanobacteria or blue-green algae. And animals, they also occur in association with animals. Example on sloth bear. So on sloth bears, this algae will grow. So these are about algae. So the form and size of algae is highly variable. That is, they range from microscopic unicellular forms So actually we saw that in the kingdom Plantae, all are multicellular, but there are some exceptions like unicellular algae, like Chlamydomonas. Chlamydomonas is one of the example, and then Acetabularia. So there are some examples for unicellular algae. So the algae actually varies from unicellular to multicellular. So as per the Whittaker Kingdom classification, all these algae, they should be placed under Protista as they are unicellular. But most of the other properties, their life cycle that resembles the plants, so they are placed under the kingdom Plantae. So there are some exceptions. So this Chlamydomonas is one of the exceptions. Although it is a unicellular algae, it is placed under the kingdom Plantae. So microscopic unicellular forms, example Chlamydomonas, and they may form colonies. That is, they exist in the form of colonies. Example is volvox, or they exist in the form of filaments. Example is Ulothrix and Spirogyra. So these are about the algae, about the form and size of the algae. And then regarding the reproduction, vegetative reproduction, that is, there are three modes of reproduction, either by vegetative means or by asexual or by sexual reproduction. By vegetative reproduction occurs by fragmentation. So we already know what is fragmentation. That is the parent organism. It's split into fragments, and each fragment, it grows into a new thallus. So that is the fragmentation or vegetative reproduction. And asexual reproduction is by the production of spores. So already we saw what are zoospores and what are aplanospores. So zoospores are the common modes of asexual reproduction in the case of algae. So they are flagellated and motile spores, and they germinate to give rise to new plants. And we saw that the zoospores are motile and aplanospores are non-motile spores. And sexual reproduction occurs through the fusion of two gametes. So the two gametes fuse together to form the zygote, and the gametes are of different types. That also we saw actually the sexual reproduction is by many types. Isogamous. One is isogamous. It is the fusion of gametes similar in size. If the size of the gametes are similar, then that is called the isogamous. But these gametes may be either, that is, both the gametes may be flagellated with the flagella, example Ulothrix, or non-flagellated, that is non-motile. They may be either with flagella or they are non-motile. Example is Spirogyra. So in the case of Spirogyra, they are non-motile. So these examples you have to be clear. Example for the flagellated gamete, that is Ulothrix, and for non-motile it is Spirogyra. And in the case of anisogamous, fusion of two gametes dissimilar in size. So both the gametes will be, so sexual reproduction means it involves the two gametes. So if both the gametes are similar in size, it is isogamous. And if both the gametes are dissimilar in size, it is anisogamous. And here the example is some species of Eudorina. It comes under the anisogamous. Then oogamous, fusion between one large non-motile static female gamete and a smaller motile male gamete. So here also, like, one will be static, the other one will be mobile, and there occurs a fusion between the non-motile and the motile gamete. So here the example is volvox and fucus. Are the examples for oogamous. The sexual, as far as the reproduction is concerned, the vegetative propagation is through fragmentation, and in the case of asexual reproduction is mainly through the formation of zoospores, and sexual reproduction may occur by three ways. Either it may be isogamous, anisogamous, or oogamous. So it can occur in any one of the three ways. So if you see the economic importance or the benefits of algae, so what is the main benefit of algae? There is a fixation of carbon dioxide. Fixation of carbon dioxide is one of the main role. So through photosynthesis, they fix the half of the total carbon dioxide on Earth. So most of the photosynthesis on Earth is only with the help of algae on Earth, and it increases the level of dissolved oxygen. So that is one of the main feature of algae. And they are the primary producers, and they form the basis of food cycles of all aquatic plants. So they are the primary producers. So many animals are dependent on algae for its food. And about 70 species of marine algae are used as food. Example, Farfira, Laminaria, and Sargassum. So these marine algae are used as food. For example, if you take Sargassum, which is also called Gulf weed, and it is one of the free floating alga. And it grows rapidly and it reproduces rapidly, and actually it occupies a large part in North Atlantic Ocean. And that region even is called Sargasso Sea. So it is called the Gulf weed. And agar from Gelidium gracilaria is used to grow microbes, and also they are used in ice creams and jellies. So agar is main ingredient that is used in ice creams and jellies. And some marine brown and red algae, they produce hydrocolloids, that is water holding substances. Example is algin, which is in brown algae, and carrageen, which is in red algae. So they have a commercial importance. They produce these substances which have the ability to hold water, hydrocolloids. And protein rich unicellular algae like chlorella. So chlorella is also an example for it. Unicellular algae, Chlamydomonas, chlorella, and Acetobacteria, they are all examples for the unicellular algae. So protein rich unicellular algae like chlorella and spirulina are used as food supplement by space travelers. So even the space travelers, they use as these algae as a food supplement. And other than this, for example, if you take they have even role in agriculture, that is, they are used as a fertilizer. And agar is having an industrial load, and even they having a medicinal properties. Many algae are having the medicinal properties. And there are also other disadvantages, like they form the algal bloom. That is the negative role of algae, is that they form algal bloom. So too much of algal growth, it make the water unfit for drinking consumption. And also in the case of seas, what happens in the boat surface or in the vessels, these algae will stick to it, and it causes the corrosion of the boats. So there are also negative role of algae. They cause the corrosion of both surfaces. So there are benefits and also some disadvantages of these algae. So now the algae is actually classified into different types based on the type of the pigments that they have. For example, Chlorophysia, which includes the green algae, and Phylogenetic or brown algae, and Rhodophysia or red algae. So on what basis they are classifying these algae actually? So based on the pigments that are present. For example, the green algae, the main pigment that is present in the green algae is chlorophyll A, they have the pigment, chlorophyll A, B, and carotenoids will be present. It is mainly beta carotene. And in the case of Phylogenetic, they have the, or brown algae, they have the fucoxanthin in addition to chlorophyll A and C, and they have the pigment xanthophyll, particularly fucoxanthin is present here. And here it has chlorophyll A, D, and phycoerythrin. So actually, since they have the difference in their pigments, so their light penetrating thing will vary. For example, some algae will grow in the deep waters and some algae will grow in the shallow water. Depending upon the pigments they have, they can survive in the particular level. That is, even in deep waters, for example, this red algae are found more in deep waters due to the presence of this phycoerythrin. So this phycoerythrin have the capability to exist in deep water because of the presence of this phycoerythrin. So actually, this by all the red algae will not be red in color, but there are some algae where this phycoerythrin, it gets degraded, and in that case only chlorophyll A and chlorophyll E. So those organisms, they will exist in shallow water. And the color of the algae also will change. They will not be always red in color. So it depends on the light penetration level, the type of what the type of algae will exist. These are about Chlorophysia, Phylogenetic, and Rhodophysia. So we'll see in detail. So the first category is Chlorophysia or green algae. They are unicellular, colonial, or filamentous. So we saw about the example for unicellular algae, that is Chlamydomonas, chlorella, and acetobularia, and exist in colony, example volva, or they may be filamentous. And usually grass green due to the pigments chlorophyll A and B in chloroplasts. So the green color is due to the pigments, and this green algae is the evolved form of algae, and it is considered to be developed into the higher plants. And the chloroplast may be of different shapes like discoid, plate-like, and reticulate, cup-shaped, spiral, or ribbon-shaped in different species. So they differ from species to species. And most of them have one or more pyrenoids. So what are pyrenoids? They are the storage bodies that are present in the algae, and they are located in chloroplasts, and they contain protein besides starch. They have both starch and the protein. So this is the example for Chlamydomonas, which is having a flagella. So it is a flagellated one. So this is the flagellum that is present, and since it is a eukaryotic organism, so it contains a nucleus and other membrane-bound organelles are present, mitochondria, cell wall. So all the membrane-bound organelles are present, and this is the pyrenoid. Pyrenoid is the storage body, and they contain protein and starch. So they have two flagella. So the main flagellated organism in the case of Protista we saw is the Euglena in Protista. So here the Chlamydomonas, it comes under the green algae. So here it is biflagellated. And then some algae, they store food as oil droplets. And they have the rigid cell wall made of an inner cellulose layer. So the inner layer will be cellulose and the outer layer will be pectose. So cellulose and outer one is pectose layer. So they have the rigid cell wall. Example for the green algae. So this we have to be clear. What are the examples that come under the different categories? Chlamydomonas, Volvox, Ulothrix, Spirogyra, and Chara. These are the examples for green algae. So Volvox, it forms colonies, and Chlamydomonas has the flagella, and this is the example for, these are the examples for the green algae, which have the main pigment chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B, and also beta carotene is present and some carotenoids. So they are similar to that of the higher plants. So next is the mode of reproduction. So vegetative reproduction by means of fragmentation that we saw, and also by the formation of different spores, and asexual reproduction by flagellated zoospores producing zoosporangia. So zoospores are produced in the structures that is called the zoosporangia. And sexual reproduction, as we saw, it may be either isogamous, anisogamous, or oogamous. We saw the difference between all these three. Here in the case of isogamous, the two gametes will be of, so in sexual reproduction, there occurs a fusion of two gametes. So if the gametes are similar in size, it is isogamous, and in anisogamous, there will be morphologically distinct structures. One will be large, the other one will be small. The case of oogamous, the female gamete will be static and the male gamete will be motile. So that condition is called the oogamous. So it may happen either by isogamous, anisogamous, or oogamous in the case of green algae. So next is the brown algae. So just we have to note down what are the ways that this brown algae differ from green algae, so that it will be easy for you to study. So here, if you see, they are mostly marine forms. So in the case of green algae, we saw that both freshwater and marine. Here they are mostly marine forms. So they show great variation in size and forms. They range from simple branched filamentous forms. So simple forms, example, ectocarpus is an example, to profusely branched forms. That is, they grow even up to a height of 100 meters. Example, kelps. So ectocarpus, kelps, that comes under the brown algae. So here the pigments they have are chlorophyll A, C, carotenoids, and xanthophylls are present. And they vary in color from olive green. So depending upon the presence of this xanthophyll, particularly the fucoxanthin, it varies from olive green to brown, depending upon the amount of xanthophyll pigment, that is fucoxanthin. So this fucoxanthin is one of the main pigment that is present in the case of brown algae. So these are the things that you have to remember. So here the food is stored as complex carbohydrate. Example, here laminarin is a type of carbohydrate, or the mannitol. So food is stored as complex carbohydrates here. The vegetative cells have a cellulosic wall. Cellulosic wall which is covered by a gelatinous coating of algae. So there we saw pectose layer, and here they have a cellulosic wall which is covered by a gelatinous coating of algae. And the protoplast contains plastids, central vacuole, and nucleus. So it contains a vacuole and nucleus. And here the plant body is attached to the substratum by a holdfast. That is, if this is a substratum, here this is the holdfast. Through the holdfast, it is attached to the substratum, and then it has a stalk, and then leaf-like structures. So here we have a leaf-like structures. So this is called the stipe, and these leaf-like photosynthetic structures are called frond. But in the case of green algae, there was not much differentiation, but here the plant body is attached to substratum by a holdfast and as a stalk, that is called stipe, and leaf-like photosynthetic organ, that is called the frond. So they have holdfast, stipe, and frond. So examples for brown algae are Ectocarpus, Dictyota, Laminaria, Sargassum, and Fucus. So you have to be clear with all these examples. So what are the examples that come under which category? So sometimes they may ask Sargassum comes under which category, whether it is a brown algae, green algae, or red algae. So be clear with all these examples. You better write it down and you have to be clear with it. So here how the reproduction is happening. Vegetative reproduction by fragmentation, so same. And asexual reproduction, here the zoospores are in a different way. So what type of zoospores are present? Pear-shaped. So here pear-shaped biflagellate zoospores. We know that the zoospores are flagella. So they are biflagellate zoospores have two unequal laterally attached flagella. So actually, if you take the structure of flagella, there are different types. So when you study under that cell chapter, we'll study about the different types. So that is monotrichous, ditrichous, and different types of flagella are present. And if you take the euglena, that is we saw under Protista, right? Euglena, the type of flagella that is present in the euglena is actually called heterocont. So what do you mean by heterocont? That is both, we saw that in euglena, the two flagellas will be of unequal size. One will be large and one will be small. So that type of flagella is called heterocont flagella, and also stichodematic. It is stichodematic. And also based on the type of hairs that is present in the flagella, there are so many different types of flagella, and this stichodematic flagella, they have the single row of hair. So different type of organisms, they have the different types of flagella based on that is whether it is a monoflagellate or the diflagellate. It is one flagella or two flagella, and based on the fact that whether the flagella are of equal length or of different length. So this heterocont means the flagella are of unequal length. It is the pair of flagella of unequal length. And also depending upon the number of hairs or the type of arrangement of the hairs in the flagella, there are different types. That is the stichodematic type is present in euglena. That is they have the single row of hair. So different organisms will have the different types of flagella. So here if you see the type of flagella here is pear-shaped biflagellate zoospores. That is they have two unequal laterally flagella, and also it depends on the position where the flagella is attached. And the sexual reproduction is isogamous, anisogamous, or oogamous. So union of gametes occur in water or within the oogonium, that is oogamous species, and gametes are pear-shaped, that is pyriform, bearing the two laterally attached flagella. So here, in the case of brown algae, the vegetative reproduction by fragmentation and asexual reproduction by pear-shaped biflagellate zoospores, and sexual reproduction is either isogamous, anisogamous, or oogamous. So the next is sorry, it's given like red algae. They have a red phthalate due to the red pigment or phycoerythrin. So it is in red algae. And it is Rhodophyceae. So majority are marine, especially in warmer areas. So they exist in marine and in warmer areas. They occur in both well-lighted region close to the surface of water and at great depths in oceans where relatively little light penetrates. So these are the main algae that present in deeper water. deeper areas. So they have the pigment phycoerythrin, which is responsible for the penetration of the light, that they can absorb the light. So they have the red thalli due to the red pigment or phycoerythrin is present. So they are mostly marine. So these are also the features of red algae and Chlorophysia. So most of them are multicellular and some have complex body organization. Food is stored as Floridian starch, which is structurally very similar to amylopectin and glycogen. So the storage form is Floridian starch here. And examples are Polysulfonia, Parpyra, Gracilaria, and Gelidium. So here also the vegetative reproduction is by fragmentation and asexual reproduction. So here the main difference is so noted down. Previously in the case of green algae and also in brown algae, we saw that the asexual reproduction is by zoospores. So here by non-motile spores. And sexual reproduction is oogamous by non-motile gametes. And it has the complex post-fertilization developments. So this is also for red algae, which is also called Rhodophyceae. So vegetative reproduction is by fragmentation and asexual reproduction is by non-motile spores, and sexual reproduction is mostly oogamous. So these are about the red algae. So we'll see the comparison of the three types of algae. So what are the main differences between Chlorophyceae, Phyophyceae, and Rhodophyceae? So the common name of Chlorophyceae is green algae, and here the Phyophyceae is brown algae, and in Rhodophyceae it is red algae, the common name. The main pigments that are present are chlorophyll A and B, which is similar to that of the higher plants. And here the main difference is fucoxanthin in brown algae, chlorophyll A, chlorophyll C, and fucoxanthin. And in the case of Rhodophyceae, it is chlorophyll A, D, and phycoerythrin. It is called as R phycoerythrin. In some cases, it will be written as C phycoerythrin. So what is the differences? Here in red algae, the phycoerythrin present is R phycoerythrin. But in some cases of cyanobacteria, that is the blue-green algae, that also have this pigment phycoerythrin, there it will be a C phycoerythrin. So they have the pigment, generally it is phycobilin. Phycobilins. So the phycobilins may be either phycocyanin or phycoerythrin, and phycocyanin is mainly present in cyanobacteria or blue-green algae, and phycoerythrin is present in red algae, but some phycoerythrin may also be present in cyanobacteria. There it is called C phycoerythrin. And the main storage food is starch in the case of Chlorophyceae. In the case of Phyophyceae, it is mannitol and laminarin. And in the case of Rhodophyceae, it is Floridian starch. And what about the cell wall? Here it is mostly cellulose, and here cellulose and algin, and here cellulosic cell wall. And also they differ in the flagellar number and also in the position of insertion. That is, here they have the 2 to 8 flagella, equal and apical flagella. That is on the top. Apical flagella is present, and here 2 unequal and lateral flagella. So the attachment of the flagella is in the lateral position. So here the flagella is absent here. So they are non-motile. Red algae is non-motile. And regarding the habitat, they are present in freshwater, salt water, and also brackish water. But if you take the brown algae, it is very rare in freshwater, mostly occurs in salt water and brackish water. They are commonly called seaweeds. So mostly occur in salt water and brackish water. And here regarding the red algae, Some are present in freshwater and mostly in salt water and brackish water. So these are the main differences between the green algae, brown algae, and red algae. So I hope you're clear with this about the general system of classification and the general introduction about the plant kingdom. That is what are we going to study under plant kingdom, and we saw in detail about the algae. So I'll see few questions. So Chlamydomonas shows isogamy, anisogamy, and both or akinets formation. So what is the answer for this? In the case of Chlamydomonas is an example for green algae. Yeah, both. They show both isogamy and anisogamy. So C is the correct answer. Clear? So then the next question. In algae, we find isogamy, anisogamy, and oogamy. So what is the answer for this? The general mode of reproduction in algae is all. Yeah, D is the correct answer. Good. So all is the correct answer. Next question is, the plant body of green algae may be unicellular, colonial, filamentous, all. Yeah, here also D is the option. That is the plant body. It may be either unicellular, examples of Chlamydomonas, Chlorella, Acetabularia, and it exists in the form of colonies, or filament. So all is the correct answer. So the major pigments in green algae are, so what are the pigments present in green algae? Dash and dash. And stored food is what? In the case of green algae, whether it is chlorophyll A, chlorophyll D, and starch, or chlorophyll A, chlorophyll C, and fluoridian starch, chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, and starch, or whether it is chlorophyll A, chlorophyll C, and mannitol. So which is the correct answer in this? Yeah, good. Both are good. Answer C, option C. That is the major pigments in green algae or chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B, and the stored food is starch. So in that way, it is similar to that of the higher plants. Green algae is similar to higher plants. So C is the correct option. And pyrenoids contain polysaccharide plus lipid, starch plus lipid, protein plus starch, starch plus glycogen. So it is the correct option. Yeah, good. C. It contains protein and starch. C is the correct option. So which of the following is not a feature of brown algae? So you read it clearly. It is a feature. It's not a feature of brown algae. Multicellularity and large size, almost exclusively marine, attached forms have full fast, and most common pigment is chlorophyll B. So which is the correct option in this? Yeah, D. Good. So why it is D? We know that the brown algae, that is, for example, kelp and all, it grow even up to 100 meters. So it is multicellular and is of large size. That is true. And almost exclusively marine. So this is also true. And attached forms of holdfast. With the help of this holdfast, it is attached to the substratum. So this is also true. But this is false. Why it is false? Most common pigment here is not chlorophyll B, but it contains chlorophyll A and then C. And brunalgae mainly it contains flucoxanthin. So this is the correct option. In most of the brown algae, asexual reproduction takes place by oxospores, aplanospores, pear-shaped pyriform zoospores that are lateral or unequal flagella, and multiflagellate zoospores. So what is the correct option in this? Yeah, C. C is the correct option here. So you have to be clear. This is the special feature in the case of asexual reproduction in brown algae. That is the pyriform, the pear-shaped zoospores. So the option C is the correct. Asexual reproduction. So which of the following is correct? In brown algae as well as red algae, vegetative reproduction takes place by fragmentation. In red algae, algal predominant pigment is or phycoerythrin. It reserves food Freudian starch in red algae is similar to amylopectin and glycogen in structure. All are correct. So which is the correct option here? Yeah, D. Both are correct. All are correct options. That is vegetative reproduction occurs only by fragmentation. Red algae, the predominant pigment is R, phycoerythrin, and reserve food in red algae is Floridian starch. So this is similar to amylopectin and glycogens because amylopectin and glycogen are also storage form. So all are correct. So chlorophyll A, chlorophyll D, and R phycoerythrin are the pigments in members of. So what is the correct option? Rhodophyceae, Piophyceae, Chlorophyceae, and Cyanophyceae. Yeah, A. I think you're clear with it now. So A is the correct option because phycoerythrin is the main pigment that is present in Rhodophyceae, and then Piophyceae, Chlorophyceae, and Cyanophyceae. So under algae, so these Cyanophyceae actually, there is cyanobacteria. They share many properties with this red algae. Some of the things like they both have the pigments phycobilins. They have the pigment phycobilins. It includes phycocyanin and phycoerythrin. And there is a special type of this cyanobacteria which is called the trichodermium. Trichodermium. Trichodermium, which is responsible for the red seed. That is, they grow more in number and they cause the red coloration of the sea. And this is caused by the cyanobacteria. But actually we saw the red tide that is caused by the dinoflagellate. So this cyanobacterium Trichodermium erythrium that also produces the red pigment and it causes the red coloration that they are calling it as red sea. So this cyanobacteria, they show many similarities with that of the red algae, that is Rhodophyceae. So but this, though it is called the blue-green algae, so now it is placed under the kingdom Monera. They show some of the similarities to that of the algae. So I think you're clear with this now. Any doubt in this? It is in algae or the systems of biological classification. Do you have any doubts? So clear? No doubts?